Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I have my May reading wrap-up for you, and I'm gonna do it a little bit different this time because I have been honestly dreading filming my May wrap-ups because I don't read, there are definitely people who read more, but I read a lot of books to talk about in one video, and I feel like I just don't want to talk about all of them if I've talked about them before. So what I'm doing now in this video, we're going to try it out and see how it goes, is I am only going to talk about the books that I have not already talked about in a vlog. So I did a lot of vlogging in May and I talked in depth about a lot of books. So if you really like discussions, if you haven't checked out my vlogs yet, and you really like in-depth discussions about the books that I'm reading, I've got some mafia romances, historical romances, contemporary romances. I've got a ton of those in my May vlogs, and I definitely spend 99% of the time in my vlogs talking about the books that I'm reading. Occasionally I'll mention some life stuff and I'll have, B-roll with music, but mostly it's just me talking about the books that I read and what I think about them. Anyway, that's just a little long shout out for my vlogs, and I just didn't really feel like rehashing them in this video. So only the books I'm talking about today are the books that I have not already talked about in a reading vlog. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first book that I want to talk about specifically is The Return of the Duke by Lorraine Heath. This is book 3 in her newest historical romance series. It's called Once Upon a Dukedom, is that right? Yes, Once Upon a Dukedom. This book hasn't been released yet. It comes out in July. Let me grab the date for you. This book comes out July 26th. So this book has the son of the Duke that was mentioned in the first book. In the first book, we see what happens when the father, the Duke at that time, was accused of treason to the Queen and he was put to death. His family was stripped of their titles and all of their money, and they've basically been trying to survive alone. So the first book follows the spare, the second book is sort of a side character, and this third book follows the heir to the dukedom, Marcus. Also, I apologize if you hear Wanda barking. She's fine, I promise you. This book, I have really been waiting to get this hero's story. I felt like he was going to be very complex. He was going to have a lot of inner turmoil, considering, what happened with his dad. I figured he would have some feelings of betrayal and all that good stuff. And what I wasn't anticipating, however, was that this book would feature our heroine, who is actually a spy. So she is a spy, but in this book it opens with Marcus believing her to be the mistress of his father. Now, right before his father was put to death, he was seen with this mistress, and so Marcus has really held a lot of bitterness towards her because, he's thinking maybe she had a hand in his father's death and in the Queen finding out about his betrayal, but also because that relationship Marcus believes to be the catalyst that caused his mother to pass away. So he's very bitter and very angry, and so he decides to go and visit this woman, who he believes to be his father's mistress, and confront her about this. And as he does that, he is having so many conflicting feelings about, I'm very attracted to this woman, and not just physically attracted, but he feels this big draw to her character, to her spirit. There's something about her that is like other, that really resonates with him and that he can't look away from, and that he continuously finds himself thinking about her and trying to find a reason to work with her, while at the same time dealing with some very bitter, angry, hurt feelings because of how he believes her to be embroiled in this plot that caused his father's death and stripped his family of their title. So it's a very complicated relationship with this couple, which I found to be completely enjoyable. This book was full of what I think Lorraine Heath does really well, in that she has really complicated not necessarily complicated, complex plots in the background that really drive the romance forward, and I think she does a really perfect blend in this for me of keeping that plot super interesting and mysterious and complex while never having it be at the expense of the romance. I found it to be nearly a perfect blend. I adored this book. I gave it 5 stars, and I think it was the perfect conclusion to this series, and I just honestly really, really loved this couple. Esme, the heroine, is also a super complex character. She's a bit of a bad A for sure, and she also, however, has this sort of hidden vulnerability, which is really satisfying to see her be willing to show that to Marcus the more they get to know one another as they end up working together throughout the book. It was just fantastic. I just ate this book up. I loved it so much. If you don't like spy plots, if you don't like a really plot-driven historical, then maybe you won't like this as much, but I found it to be super compelling, very readable, and just a ton of fun. So 5 stars for that one. Okay, so the next book that I read is book 3 in the Scoundrels of St. James series by Lorraine Heath. This book was fantastic too. Like, you're gonna see a lot of Lorraine Heath. I really fell back on her as an author to get me really sucked into a book and to really just deliver on what I wanted in a historical romance. I think that there are very, very few books that I've read. Honestly, I don't even know that there is a major disappointment that I've had in her backlist, maybe one, but even that one, like, as I'm looking back on it, the second book in the Once Upon a Dukedom series, I don't know that it was a major disappointment so much as I had my expectations set to be something different. So this book follows Franny, who is part of this found family of orphans, basically, who've been taken under the wing of Fagin, and there's vibes of Oliver Twist in here, and I've really been wanting Franny's story because we meet her in the first book where the hero believes himself to be in love with her, while we clearly see that he's not in love with her, he's in love with the idea of her. So I wanted her to get a happily ever after. I wanted more of her backstory, and that completely delivered here. She is a woman who knows what men want from her, and she doesn't want to give that up easily at all. Like, she is feisty, she is clever, she is smart, she's obviously beautiful, but she is a woman who is making the best of her life from some very rough and sad beginnings. This whole series really deals with some themes or content warnings for sexual abuse and probably even, like, I would say child trafficking, and it can feel a little bit heavy and a little bit gritty at times, but I actually really enjoyed that because, again, I feel like Lorraine Heath balances that so well with her swoony, epic feeling romances in here, and I just found this book, again, unputdownable, adored every single page of it. I think that I was a little surprised that I liked this so much. I gave this book 5 stars, if I didn't say that already, because it really has a focus on a bit of a mistress plot, mistress trope, which I don't really love, where the hero is like the 8th Duke of Grayson. Is that it? Greystone. He's the 8th Duke of Greystone, and he sees her and wants her so badly, and he wants to bed her, and he thinks, of course, that's all that he wants with her, but we know that's not how it's really gonna go down. But there's something I find very off-putting, even though I know it's realistic, to read about a hero who refuses to marry the heroine. Even if they have difference in classes or whatever, I want to see that hero stand up and say, no, I choose you to be my wife, because I don't need that level of historical accuracy, right? I want to have the fantasy of a rich, powerful man just completely throwing those social conventions out the window and choosing the woman that he loves to be his wife, and not just to bed her. So that's why that trope doesn't really work for me always. But it really worked here, and I think it worked so well for me because we could see very clearly on that Sterling really had feelings for her. That went beyond just the bedroom. Like, he wanted her, and he made no... he went after her. He didn't try to downplay it too much. So I really enjoyed this. It was swoony. It had a really excellent background plot. The epilogue in here made my heart so happy, and that is largely why I gave this 5 stars, because there were parts of this that I was like, I think maybe this is going to be a 4-star, but then that ending with Fagin specifically just sealed the deal for me and just made me adore this book so much. So 5 stars for this one. Okay, so the next book that I read is Overlord by Anna Hackett. So I was, after reading a bunch of historicals and mafia romances, I kind of wanted something a little bit fantastical. And so I saw this book on Audible when I was just like browsing, and I was immediately drawn in by the cover, and the concept of this intrigued me a whole lot. So this is a sci-fi romance. We have our heroine who lives on Earth, but it's in like a futuristic time, and she is a pilot. And so her and this other like researcher get in this ship to go to this other planet. And as they do that, they end up crash landing on a different planet. And that's where she meets Mal, who is the warlord of this planet. He is a fierce protector of his people, and he he rescues her from this crash, and her friend Poppy, the researcher, is gone. They can't find her. And he believes that our heroine Rain has been sent here by his father, who is sort of a murderous overlord who is trying to bring about the demise of Mal's people. So it's very fun. They have a really good relationship because they start off with a little bit of enemies because she wakes up in his arms vaguely, and then she wakes up like chained to a bed because he believes her to be like an assassin who's here to kill him or destroy his people. And they have really good banter. They have great sexual chemistry. This is very action-packed. It's fast-paced. It was just a ton of fun to listen to. I really, really enjoyed it. I just found their chemistry to be a ton of fun. I listened to this in a day. It was like the perfect palate cleanser that I needed from what I typically read of either something that's really a dark romance or an emotional romance or something that's historical. This was just a fun event and journey, and I just truly, truly loved it. I do think, like, if I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars because I did feel like their relationship went from enemies and banter to I need to have you right now in my bed a little too fast for me. You know how I feel about that? I want to see more steps from I hate you to I want you. I don't like that. I feel like it's just too obvious, and I just am bored by that. So I was hoping for a little more development in that area between enemies to lovers, but other than that, it was just a ton of fun and I enjoyed it a lot. Alright, so the next book that I want to talk about is Always Practice Safe Hex. This is book 4 in the Stay a Spell series by Juliet Cross. Juliet Cross is one of my favorite authors. I am never not completely satisfied by one of her books. I find her to do such a great job of building chemistry and having great found family in her books, but also I think she does banter and humor and sexiness like so well. And this series is specifically one of my favorite series of all time. I love how she writes paranormal romances. I think that the magic is very clever, the creatures are very clever, but the romance is also perfectly swoony and delicious, and I just really love it. So this book features a Grimm, and our heroine is a witch, and I've been waiting for this romance for so freaking long, and I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. It was fantastic. This couple has so much chemistry. Oh my gosh. They have so much chemistry. So they end up working together. They've known each other. We've seen them interact in previous books, but they end up working together on this deal to help to build up this basically like an adoption agency for supernatural creatures. And so they're in close contact in that way. But they have this combustible chemistry, like so combustible. And the thing that I found really, really interesting about this was that our heroine, Livy, is very much like she prefers to be the dominant force in her relationships, and Gareth is dominant. And it was really interesting watching this power dynamic between this couple and watching Livy only be submissive to Gareth because of the intensity of her feelings for him, and this just had a lot of exploration into that power dynamics, which was very interesting and very fun. I loved the villain in here is truly, truly devious, and I also just find the plot in this to be very, very clever and very interesting. I loved the side characters, of course. I loved seeing returning characters from the Stay a Spell universe. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was extremely steamy. This was giving me so many, like, broody emo boy vibes, like all the paranormal romances I read, like, in my early 20s. Like, this was giving me that feeling, only, like, better, like, times 1,000. Like, this is definitely one of the best paranormal romances I have ever read, and I adored it so much. And if you haven't started this series, I highly, highly recommend it because it's so fun, it's so swoony, it's so fun. Like, I love it. I enjoy it immensely. Alright, so the next book that I read is To Ruin a Gentleman by Shauna Galen. So this book, I actually found this just on Libby. I was trying to find books by Shauna Galen that was available to me on Libby, and I did not realize this was a novella. This was the first book in the series, so I just picked it up. It was a very short read. It was a great introduction to the series. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. Shauna Galen is a really great historical romance author. I feel like not enough people talk about her, to be honest. I think that she is excellent at building chemistry in her couples, but at also building a really interesting background plot. Like, she writes about spies and, you know, like the Napoleonic War very often in her books, and I think that it's really, really interesting, and I enjoy her books a ton. So I was very excited. This is sort of a spin on the Scarlet Pimpernel, and it does take place during the Napoleonic War. We have our heroine Angelette, I don't know how to say her name, who is a widow, and she's living in France, and Hugh Daventry comes, he's the hero of the book, and he comes to visit for like a wine tasting, I believe. And he has been trying to tell people about all of the unrest that is happening in Paris and how dangerous it is, and he feels this immediate connection with Angelette, and he warns her that, look, war is coming. There is terrible things are headed our way. I've seen it. And she doesn't believe him, and she doesn't want to leave her chateau and all of her employees there, and she eventually ends up changing her mind as her chateau is attacked. And so Hugh and Angela end up sort of running for their lives, and they build this very strong rapport that is, of course, powered by their chemistry for one another. This was decently steamy for a novella. I really, honestly, thoroughly enjoyed their chemistry, the plot, the setup for what is going to be, I think, a really great series, which I can't wait to read more books in this series. And I honestly just had a great time reading this. I thought it was very clever. It was very well thought out. There was great chemistry. I mean, the writing was solid. It was very easy to get invested in the story, and I just enjoyed it a lot. So honestly, the only reason I'm giving it 4 stars is really just because I don't even know, because I think I'm probably, I guess if I had to say why it's a 4-star instead of a 5, is just that the romance was a little bit speeded up, and I think that's really mostly due to the fact that this was a novella and not a full-length book, but I enjoyed it a lot. I can't wait to continue on in the series. I loved this couple, and it was just really, really good, honestly. Alright, so the next book that I have to talk about is The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe. So this book is a historical romance that I gave 5 stars to. I enjoyed this immensely. I thought that it was very, very good. I still like The Lady Gets Lucky better, but this was a solid 5-star read for me. This had a really great beginning with our couple. Our heroine, Catherine, believes her to have this arranged marriage with Preston that their fathers had, arranged for them, and she goes to his office with this list of everything they need to do for the wedding, and he's like, no, I'm not marrying you. No, not at all. That's just an archaic thing that our dads thought of. I wasn't ever going to go through with it, even though it was technically a contract. So she leaves his office just completely kind of devastated and feeling a little bit foolish, and before she even leaves the building, she actually ends up experiencing like this righteous rage that, how dare he go back on this deal without even saying a word to me? I had planned for this, I didn't party or do anything for my coming out year because I had planned to marry him. So she barges back into his office and basically says, yeah, well, I wouldn't want to marry you anyway. Like, she just lets him have it, and it was just fantastic. So that was a turning point for her, and that was a moment that really kind of sparked his interest in her, and she decides that from this point on, she's going to live her life for her. So she wants to experience carnal things. She goes to this masquerade ball, determined to have a sexy night, where she meets none other than Preston, although it is not known to her or to him that that is who the other one is. They have a very steamy night. It's very enjoyable. They agree to meet up later on, and that's when it's revealed who they actually are. So this whole book is really just a series of the two of these people having this extreme chemistry and having this shared passionate moment where they didn't know who the other person was, and then coming back realizing who that person was with the added baggage of, but I had so many fiery feelings for you and I don't know what to do with them, and trying to decide if they want to make it work, and falling into friendship and then eventually love. And of course our hero does something that is completely stupid and dumb and idiotic, and just ends up needing to grovel for the heroine. So I really loved this. I felt like this was a great Joanna Shupe book. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun time, and I gave it 5 stars. Alright, so the next book that I have to talk about is actually a mystery. I read The Business of Blood by Kerrigan Byrne. I adore Kerrigan Byrne. I love her Victorian Rebels series. I think that she is a fantastic writer, and I've really been curious about her mystery series. So this is not a romance. This is a mystery. It does have just the teенsiest, tiniest spark of what might be considered chemistry in future books. Similar to like Miss Scarlet and the Duke. It was giving me major vibes if you've seen that show for that. And it is set in Victorian England. This is a Jack the Ripper murder mystery. Our heroine has had her childhood friend 2 years earlier from when this book starts. Her childhood friend was the last victim of Jack the Ripper, and so Fiona is trying to come to terms with that and live her life while at the same time wanting so desperately to get vengeance for her friend. When all of a sudden, 2 years after that murder happened, some murders start happening again. She's the one who finds them, she cleans up the bodies, and it is this big murder mystery plot. Is it Jack the Ripper? Is it not? who's involved, who is not. I enjoyed this. This was compulsively readable. I had a hard time putting it down. I did, however, figure out who the murderer was fairly early on. I felt like it was telegraphed a little too clearly, but I still really, really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I definitely plan to read more in the series because I loved and adored it so much. All right, there you have it. Those are the books that I read in May that I did not get a chance to talk to you about. I do very briefly want to mention I started this book in May, finished it on June 1st. This book is going on my top 10 of the year. This is a historical romance with a trans heroine and its childhood friends to adult lovers. It is achingly, beautifully character-driven and romantic, and it has one of the sweetest epilogues that I have ever read in my life. The way these two accepted each other and adored each other while still being so nervous and tentative that maybe their love or who they were wouldn't be accepted was just so completely heartbreakingly beautiful. I just wanted to mention this because I don't know when I'll get a chance to talk about it. I literally just finished it yesterday. I cannot stop thinking about it. I loved this book with my entire heart and soul, and I want everyone on the planet to read it. 6 stars. Loved it so much. Okay, for real. Now I'm done. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I'll see y'all in my next video.